Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astuma Viddishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us. May our study be full of fruitfulness, strength, and vigor. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is a Vedanta series question and answer. It gives us the opportunity to attend to the things that are most pressing for you.
Witness the knower and the eternal witness. And it's there all the time, never changing and constant. How really do we know? How can we be aware in deep sleep? How are we sure there's awareness still there in deep sleep? How do we know that the eternal witness is still there in deep sleep?
Okay. The simple answer to your question is because we are aware of a peace. We are not aware of any objects or anything else like that. And it gives us a blissful sense, but the sense that it moves on. And we are able to stand back and recollect what happened. So something came and something went. This awareness of coming and going means some entity is aware that entity never came, never went. It remains constant. Now, when all that is transcended, when all these three states are transcended, then even that goes off. And then, of course, from a waking point of view, you can measure these various states of consciousness in terms of their translated brainwaves. And so there are certain brainwaves that enter into the picture when people even study sleep as such for various reasons. People study sleep for sleep maladies. People have sleep problems, difficulties in entering sleep. So we are aware, there's an awareness. If that awareness wasn't there, we couldn't recall the awareness of it later. There must have been an awareness there. So it's a very interesting question. But these three states of consciousness, of course, are the very hub of the Vedantic argument. And we don't arrive at it simply because some scripture tells us it. It is our own experience of it. The difficulty is we make our evaluation from our waking state and dismiss all the others. One we dismiss as a blank. One we dismiss as a set of adventures that don't conform to our literal realism in our waking state. So we can go into that if you like. It's as if something moved and flew into a different region. It describes something like a swan. A swan goes from the nest and settles in another nest. And then goes again to another area, as it were. And that area is an area of potentiality. It must surely be the most creative part of human consciousness. This single awareness. Now, normally our attention is dispersed externally. Attention is something like a probe that has the capacity to make a scan of all the objects in front of us. And it effectively takes all the information. And so it is necessary for this awareness to have certain instrumental probes attached to it. These are the sense organs, eyes, ears, etc. And all this is gathered in. And if we are one sense less, the information also becomes less. Now, if all the senses are gone, then only the awareness remains. And that awareness, therefore, can be turned internally also. We can call it a foreign policy and a domestic policy. Very often, see, when we face difficulties and problems, if it is a stone in our way, we know how to remove that kind of transcendence we have. And if there are other obstacles in the way, wild animals and so on and so forth, we can capture them, we can cage them. But the internal obstacles are much more difficult. And these internal obstacles are related to the external events as well. But these are only external in our waking state. So it makes sense for us to deal with the obstacles by engaging all these states of consciousness completely. When the obstacle is derived from other difficult people, awkward situations, then we arm ourselves with a number of unhelpful policies. We can call these foreign policies. We can imagine that we are being attacked and that people are ignorantly against us. And then this ignorance has these certain number of children. So anger, fear, laziness, these are the children. And then we formulate a revenge policy perhaps, or something like that. Thinking that this waking state is our entire world, we formulate that strategy. And then what about these internal obstacles of thoughts and desires and temptations and internal fears? And these play out unconsciously in a dream state. And so we again rally our negative forces against that. Thinking that we are individual, thinking that we are bombarded from outside. Like a foreign air force coming and landing bombs on us. We rally our own air force and do some counter bombing. But is there another way? The way will be a clue from different states of consciousness. Firstly, we can rally around another piece of armory, which is our own will. And that has to be scripturally based. If it's not scripturally based, we have no direction in how to deal with these things. So in the beginning, we rely on scripture. If we pick up even the way of devotion, we rely on scripture. Narada Bhakti Sutras gives us this in the 12th aphorism. The 12th aphorism will tell us, Bhautu Nishaya Nardhya Dhurvam Shastra Rakshanam. That is, that we are reliant on, for direction, scripture in the beginning until we gather our own momentum. Like in the old days, a car, you have to wind the engine up with an old-fashioned handle. And then when it's up and running, then the whole thing moves effortlessly. But the initial effort is there to get the thing going. Same thing with an old-fashioned airplane. The only difference with modern airplanes is that the whole effort to wind things up is all mechanical. But some fuel is needed. Some switch has to be turned on. So there should be conformity, even with the Narada Bhakti Sutras, with the scriptures until one's faith is firmly established. So the whole thing is, how do we get the faith enough to start a spiritual life? And all of these various Vedantic points of view are scripture-based, and that scripture will serve to strengthen our faith. So we start off really from a scriptural point of view, and this speciality of this Mandukya Upanishad is these three states of consciousness. We could have a dedicated session to these three states, since Shankaracharya's grand teacher, Gaudapada, has written an enormous Karika commentary on this, much vaster than the Upanishad itself. And he's taking the point of view of the absolute, this witness point of view. Shankaracharya is taking it from the relative point of view, but his grand teacher is taking it from the absolute point of view and looking at it from that. Now we can also experience it in any state. We can experience a sense of withdrawing, and in meditation we can go through a kind of simulated dream of our own. That's the meditation process. In going through the simulated dream, we can construct all the components that would be there, maybe in a delightful and beautiful dream. We can increase the color, increase the contrast, increase the brightness. Make it something like a Walt Disney picture, where green is ultra green and blue is ultra blue. And take our mind or attention on an adventure until we come to the point where we ask, oh, attention that normally goes outside and now is there in a world, an internal world, you are aware. You are aware of all the scenes presented. And you are aware that there's a director, but the director is independent of the mind. This director, being independent of our attention, is able to direct it. But what is the nature itself of the attention? And we can find the subjective view where a position of poise ultimately takes place, where all your adventurous scenarios are leading you to a point of suspension. And that suspension is an awareness alone. It is in the meditative process, it is withdrawing all our attention from the outside to the inside until we investigate, where does this probe come from? What is its subjective aspect? And there we find consciousness itself as a subject. And because it's there and it's witnessing, then we can call it, for the time being, a witness. Time being, because when there is nothing to witness, it's not fair to call it a witness. And when thought is flowing through the mind in the form of attention towards an object, be it internal or external, then we can also call this a thinker. And when this consciousness is there and there is absolutely no other thing there, then we can also call it, a knower. So we know everything within the world, progressive world of pure consciousness standing there, manifested consciousness in dream, and ultimately its concretized version that we call the waking state. So what is our process? Our process is to go backwards. What are we doing to find out what is the truth? We can go from the witnessing aspect which we find there in the waking state, to the witnessing aspect which is there in the dream state, to the witness that stands alone and witnesses an amorphous peace, because we can catch a sense of joy there. It is when there is something like an open space, that is when we have no sense of objectivity, of boundaries. And then also when time also slips away, time and space was well known to be the same thing, just two sides of the same coin. When all of this goes away, what is found there? There's a story like that in the Chandogya Upanishad. There's a story there about Upakoshala. The Chandogya Upanishad can be extremely complicated in the beginning until we find out the purport of it. And then we also have, to make it easy, a number of different stories told. And so many of the stories are to do with students in a teacher's house. Only by the age of 12, students were sent off into the forest to live with the teacher and his wife, and there to learn all the things that are to be learned. But the primary learning really is about the supreme truth, because without that foundation, we can't operate in the waking world as any good citizen and embark on the rest of our life. In spiritual life, we don't suddenly embark on it. There's a certain element of training necessary. A certain degree of purification is necessary. For example, take a simple quality such as humility. It's no good going in a blustery way, with a blustery attitude into the world and asserting our own self-importance. It's not going to work. We're at a kind of crossroads now that if we don't, in a cooperative way, do something different, we're in trouble. And one of the questions I ask people is, what did you learn from this COVID lockdown? I might even just ask it as an open question to you. What did you learn from this COVID lockdown? Now, one thing that is obvious is that we are not separate entities. There is a whole communication unit which is going on. A world wide web is being used. And we realize that our problem is not ours alone. Everywhere in the world has these restrictions and regulations to do with COVID. Every country in the world is seeing a rise in its death rate among certain sections of the society, and with an urge to save life and save suffering, hospitals and clinics are bombarded with patients that have the various symptoms of the COVID. And what makes a pandemic is not really the death rate or anything like this. In these modern times, it's the capacity for health systems to cope with it. And when they can no longer cope, it becomes something like a crisis. So there's an urge to control it. And so the COVID virus is no respecter of persons. In fact, disease overall is no respecter of persons, but it comes home to us when we're able to communicate with people at the furthest corner of the world and see that we are under the same difficulties. In this way, we should also assert that there is a single planet that we live on. At the moment, people are trying to establish something on Mars. There's a project like that. A terraformation plan is there. It may take 500 or 600 years to do, actually. You can start off by making sure the planet Mars is warmer. At the moment, the average temperature is minus 85 degrees. So we know that it has to come down to maybe at least Arctic temperatures, something like that. Give it a chance for something to form. And then like that, you see. Now, if you don't have a sense of global awareness today, if you don't have a sense of the other person, if you are stuck with selfishness, then nobody will benefit, least of all you. So some training has to be there. So typically at the age of 12, it was the custom in Vedic times, Indian times on the Indian subcontinent, to take students, having learned some rudimentary things, and take them through what is equivalent today as high school and university education for 12 years. Upakosala stays in the house of his teacher for 12 years. What did he learn? He learned how to maintain and tend fires. And when we say fires, fires are used not just for cooking and warming and so on. These are ceremonial fires. That is, these are devices where we can be of some use to nature. How can fires be of some use to nature? It's not the fires in themselves. It's our attitude toward them and a ceremonial way of dealing with them, thinking that the flames are messengers, as it were, taking all our wishes and desires and noble thoughts onward and upward for the benefit of everybody. The ancient society was structured in such a way that there had to be food. And how do you provide food? Rainfall is necessary. And how do you get rainfall? Dedicated people were there with the ceremonial intentions and the mantras put forward. And in this way, they were of use to the whole of society. They had to be protected by military people, and they had to be financed by people involved in industry, commerce, and agriculture. And in society, there had also to be provision for unskilled labor. This comes out as the 4 varna or caste system, and every society relies on it. Upakoshala, for 12 years, he didn't learn anything apparently. He was simply tending the fires. And so what it means for all of us, it means we require patience. In the COVID crisis, as it's called, we require patience, persistence, and we require faith. So, Upakoshalaha vai kamalayanaha. This is, by the way, 4th section of the Chandogya Upanishad, or 4th chapter, 2nd section, and we are dealing with the first stanza. So he was the son of Kamala. He dwelt with Satyakama, Jabala. We understood previously, Jabala was a student himself, and we went through his story as well. And he was, of course, a student of what? Of sacred wisdom, all wisdom being sacred. And he tended his fires for 12 years. The teacher, though, allowed other pupils, after they learned, come, learn, and go off. But he never did this with the Upakoshala. So Upakoshala becomes despondent, and he has an ally in the teacher's wife. Satyakama's wife is there, and she says, why don't you do something for this poor student? You did everything for everybody else. And so he's performed his penance. He's performed everything that you asked him to do. His tapasya is there. And he's tended the fire as well. He hasn't done a sloppy job of it. He's been diligent in doing it. So don't put yourself in a situation, husband, whereby the fires themselves will blame you. In other words, the forces of nature will reward you only with what you've put into them. And why are you treating this person in this way? And so, give him the teaching. No doubt Satyakama resolved, yes, I'll do it, but I have to go away, and he had to go on a journey. And the teacher's wife had said to the student, please eat something. And he said, I can't even eat. My mind is so disturbed, I'm upset. I'm so full of grief that I haven't all these years ever got the teaching. And so my desires proceed in different directions. Whole mind is in turmoil, and I cannot eat. That's the state of the student. So then what to do? Now we have a previous story in this Chandogya Upanishad of how the fires themselves teach, how a bull teaches. There are many teachers, that is, looking into the fire, then reflecting, means reflecting internally, taking this attention from the outside and allowing the fire to be an avenue for meditation. And with that meditation, something comes from it. What is meditation? One form of it will be to get into such a position whereby you are listening and some revelation comes. And many people discover through concentration some discoveries. It came to me as the expression. In some cases, it came to me in a dream. Others, it came when I was simply reflecting on it. Because the unconscious mind is continuously working. And the unconscious mind is God's voice putting things into a sorting mechanism and categories for you. This is the importance of dream. So then the fires got together, as it were, and they said to themselves, this student of sacred wisdom, he's performed our service well, he's kept us going. See, in the ancient days, you daren't put a fire out because then you have to start it again, and matches were not available in those days. Butane lighter, no such thing. You laboriously had to make the fire. That's why fire was very sacred. One of the most significant discoveries of man universally was fire. So the student of sacred wisdom has helped us, performed this service to us very well. I think we should teach him, because all this time the fires are acknowledged as God himself or the Supreme itself, as this Brahman itself. Being Brahman, will Brahman not teach you in that form? And the significance of fire, will they not ignite your knowledge? And so they declared three things. And they put it in this way. Prana. Prana, life. Life itself, everything that mobilizes, anything that moves. In the waking state, we can add, in the dream state. And these two aspects we can summarize as prana, life, life force. Now it's easy to see in a waking state. We can look out today. Today is a beautiful spring day. You go out and you know there's an expression, spring is in the air. When you go out, yes, everything has a great stillness and there's a gentle warmth coming through the cold. And you feel there's a shift somewhere. There's a difference in seasons and nature is responding to it. The flowers are growing. The grass is so much greener and lush. And it seems that all of life, birds and so on, there's a kind of calmness in the early morning. Early morning meaning after the sun has risen anyway, at least that much. And so, life is Brahman. Life is the supreme principle that we are all seeking. Now, what do we mean by Brahman? That supreme principle, after which stands after eliminating everything else. Swami Vivekananda gave this wonderful interpretation of what the universe was, or definition. The universe, he said, was the absolute, seen by us through space and time. It's a beautiful, beautiful description. But the life itself is within the operation of space and time, registered in the waking state, and internally registered in the dream state. Things are moving. And the dreamer himself is still breathing. But then comes to dreamless sleep, where there is a witness. That's not normally registered. Our life is normally registered in this small sphere of acting and reacting, assuming that there's an enemy against us. You know the diagram I put there as a circle, and half of it me, and then the other side, things which I feel are threatening me, and then a mind is there, and things are threatening there, and my so-called normal way of dealing with it is purely from my involvement in this. But I don't get any peace. So if we are stuck in this environment that says that we will be self-centered, this happens on a domestic level, an individual level, and a national level also. So one thing that we have learned from the COVID virus is we're all in the same boat. We knew it before, but was it ever brought home to us? Everybody is suffering. So there's a connectedness. And with modern technology, it makes it so also. But we are in dire straits. So I mentioned Mars because we are messing up this planet. This planet, the next generation after us, even the current young generation, maybe within 5 or 6 years may see disastrous things unless we change our thinking. unless we become selfless. The whole of religion is really selflessness, truthfulness and selflessness. That's the whole of it. And the minute we move toward that, then the better things will become. So if you want to go and establish over the next 500-600 years some habitable place on Mars, is it because you're going to mess that up also? And the way that we'll transfer life from the Earth to Mars is to do what we are doing best at the moment, warming the planet. We are affecting climate change so radically that we're warming the planet, and the consequence of this will be disastrous. So we have this advantage of our warming the planet in a careless way has given us a clue how to do it on Mars. Mars is much smaller, about half the size of the Earth. But water is there, abundance of water is there. And then the next phase is to get the water flowing, make sure that we assume that there are cyanobacteria there which are able to cooperate with lichen and moss. And we know exactly the tree horizon, where the tree band is, where fir trees will survive in cold climates. And all of this will generate an oxygen-rich atmosphere. And then we find life growing by itself. Let's say 500 to 600 years, feasibly it could happen. But right now, what are we doing? So we are living in this waking sphere, trying to deal with it, and not understanding that there is something more profound, that here is called Brahman. So life itself is Brahman. The thing that's mobilizing everything is that entity. But we have to qualify it in the waking and dream states. So it goes on to say then, therefore, after saying Prano Brahma, it's Kam Brahman, Kam Brahmeti. What does that mean? Well, Upakosala himself doesn't understand it. So what are they trying to say? So he asked the question. Now what is meant by Kam is actually joy. Joy. And joy can equate to a dream. So joy is Brahman. Joy is Brahman. Bliss is Brahman. But under what conditions do we find bliss? Only when there's no space and time. When space and time is taken away, then only we get this bliss. So when we enter into a self-analysis procedure, an internal journey, we find this in the Taittiriya Upanishad, where 5 koshas are mentioned, 5 sheaths are mentioned. And the final sheath is that which is Ananda, Ananda kosha. That is in a state of dreamless sleep where nothing else is there. So much stillness is there because there's a sense of peace. The peace comes from the absence of duality. Most people solve their problems through a dualistic approach, using this foreign policy and domestic policy, not realizing that there's a place of potentiality where everything can spring from. Like daffodils. Daffodils, you can see, of course, many flowers are there coming up in spring, but the yellow of the daffodils, as if nature understands, let's brighten your whole life with yellow. Such a bright, beautiful color, and make structure in such a way that these flowers know how to orientate toward the sun and know how to hide, because you can plant the bulbs months and months ahead. And only when the conditions are right will something surface. Before you know it, the following day, some beautiful flower is there. In our communal garden, we have one lone daffodil. And with its head bowed, and with the full moon as it is now, we can see when the nighttime is there, even before the sun rises, they're standing there as if sleeping, as if in this dreamless sleep state with head bowed. And then as the sun comes up, in that same way, the head of the daffodil comes up, and we enjoy it and it enjoys us, it seems. And then what does this ka mean? It means this ether, this space. So we have this akasha going on. And then it goes on, sahovacha, vijnanyami aham. Then he said, I understand that life is Brahman because I'm familiar with the waking state. But joy or bliss and space or ether, I don't understand this. So they said to him, no, bliss truly, that is the same as the space. Space meaning an area where there's no dividedness. We get some idea of it when we look up into the blue sky, unending. Or when we look into space and we find just darkness, 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 darkness everywhere, particularly when we get out of the planet Earth. We have nothing to disturb our vision, and there's all black. You stand on the moon, it's only black. You don't see the twinkling of the stars. There's nothing to highlight them. And the dilution, the density of this universe is very little. It's pretty much empty space. So you can see the absence of time, the absence of space brings about a certain sense of bliss, a certain sense of peace. So that is the same, and truly this space, truly, that is the same as bliss. And then, of course, they explain to him these two aspects, the life, and life has movement in it. We can equate it to time and the space. And then other explanations are given. So this is a very beautiful passage that tells us, actually, with mentioning it blatantly, about 3 states of consciousness. And the final one is there, you see this joy, and all of it is Brahman because only one consciousness is there, displayed in 3 ways. If you're standing behind a wall, and there you'll see 3 things coming up: a red ball, a blue ball, a white ball, red, white, blue, red, white, blue. Or you're seeing slowly provided light if you have a careful observation of it. There's a wonderful Buddhist example of that. And also given in other passages too, given in the Bhagavatam as well. Supposing you have a lamp like a torchlight, and then you move it slowly like this, you'll catch it. But if you move it quickly in this way, you create a figure of 8. Now somebody unsuspecting, not knowing the science of this or the movement of this, or how each point of light was radiated quickly, quicker than the eye can catch. You wonder, how is it that you managed to produce the number 8 in front of you? You stood here, no number 8 in front of you. All of a sudden, number 8 appeared. How is it possible? Now you can use this as a wonderful example. What we are seeing as the waking state, what we're witnessing there, something like the figure of 8 rapidly put within the limitations of the eye to catch. We can only catch certain rates of movement. Certain momentums is within the visual range and certain without it. And then when you slow it down, you see, I see what's happening. When you stop completely, I see. It's all gone. But behind it, there must be some entity that did it. So that subjective entity, all of these states will lead us to a subjective entity that knows. And that then operates as a witness, knower, thinker in one. And that sense of I is the ultimate Brahman. Because it was Brahman that produced all this. We don't have to look for a second-hand creator. We don't have to look for or puzzle over this separation of creator and creation. The magic show of putting the light out was enough, and rotating it rapidly as a figure eight was enough. And when we slow it down and investigate it, the first port of call is scripture tells us about it. Next thing, we rely on its faith. Next thing, it tells us how we arrive at this. One of the great argument that we arrive at it from would be to understand the nature of space and time and understand these three states of consciousness until ultimately there's one entity standing there. Without some independent entity standing there, we cannot register the awareness of peace. And without this witness not standing there, we cannot witness the events of dream. And without this witness standing there, we cannot stand back and witness what happened yesterday. The entity that is able to recall all the memories is a witness. The entity that is able to define all of these is a knower. And the entity that is able to supply us with a current for further configurations is called a thinker. And we can consolidate all of this into an entity which is self. And they call this Atman. And then we know that there are no two also. So there's a process starting from a beginning stage, scripturally based, as we've seen. Even the path of devotion will tell us. And then to go on to say that the full glory of this knowledge comes about when space and time are truly evaluated, and the absence of it is pure consciousness. And then the display of it, then we have a new valuation of the display. It becomes a glory to us. Then for this Upakoshala, the meaning then of tending the fires becomes. It becomes a reality for him. You're tending the fires, what was then behind it? It was by meditating on the fires, by meditating on this element. In this same way, by meditating on all the key components of life, we find the answer and the key to life itself. And to review what was the lesson, life itself is consciousness. Of course, the lesson continues because that's broken down into specific examples within these contexts. Like a station master, as I always say, standing on a platform, seeing the trains come and go one after the other, or a person seeing three balls being thrown up in the air and coming down, red, white, and blue, red, white, and blue, with the thrower being invisible and wondering, how is it? There must be a witness. There always must be a witness. Wherever there's a change, we must understand a witness, but also wherever there's a presence. So what have we done? Waking comprises time and space. Dream, time and space. Both have causation within them. And ultimately, the so-called blank is awareness itself. Now on a universal level, we also find it. That state of potentiality we call God sitting doing nothing. So from a waking state, we say what happens in a deep dreamless sleep. But that's the evaluation from the waking state. From the devotee state is God sitting there, not doing anything. Then moving one leg, that's a dream. Moving another one, waking state. Withdrawing one, dream. Withdrawing two, God sitting there. So what do I do when I enter into deep sleep? I'm resting in God's lap. A much better way of thinking of it. All right.
Is it legitimate to ask that why this specific type of method was applicable to Upakaushala, whereas the others received different training. Because ultimately he had to come and observe for himself, and the other Upanishadic stories of the teacher students are also similar. So I really couldn't figure out the distinction of the teaching method, if it is legitimate to ask. I don't know if it is very silly to think that.
Well, I never got a chance to ask Shvetaketu this question.
Sorry.
But it's recorded as a lesson there. And so it's a beautiful, interesting story, because look at all the various characters. A teacher who felt other students were capable and others were not. Last night I was talking about Swami Purnananda, how he had such profound insights. And I thought I had to revise my own answers to questions around people who said, oh, Bhagavad Gita, yes, done that. I always remember a cartoon of two monks, the Benedictine monks actually, you see. And I think the book was a cartoon book, it was called Top Sacred. It was pulling the legs of monastics, and it was written by a Benedictine monk as well. So he saw the funny side of his own life. Two monks are sitting there in a cell, and one is offering a book, the Bible, and the other one confidently puts his hand up and says, no thanks, I've read it. So you see, the Bhagavad Gita, have you read it? Yes. Have you studied it? No. Why not? I can supply the answer. Because you're not competent yet to study it. Because Latu Maharaj's answer about it was, because it's a book embodying the principle of renunciation, I have to be interested in the subject matter, namely renunciation. So therefore, have I an interest in that? Have I started certain steps for it? And the Bhagavad Gita itself tells us this, about this competency, that it's not to be taught for those who are not competent. And even the Narada Bhakti Sutras that I have quoted tell us that only for those, this teaching of devotion, which is the main path, dualistic path for most people, can only be taught and practiced by competent people. That is, by people who have made a certain polishing effort in the mind, people of certain purity. So maybe this Upakoshala was found to be wanting in this area. And so he had to do this tending of the fires. And 12 years. Now look at that. Because there's no evidence in the text about whether he made any complaint about it. It was only that his spirits were down. But obviously the teacher had decided this. But then 12 years is the normal period of time when after this you go home. So imagine this, a student about to be sent home without learning anything except how to tend the fires. Naturally, he became very despondent. And as usual, it is the teacher's wife who probes and says, hey, this person has done a good job here. All the others have learned and gone back to their homes. And you're keeping this person here, just making him do this. Now, there's no evidence in the text as to whether the teacher makes any reply, but we infer that he agrees. But before he can teach the student anything, some other business takes place and he goes off. And naturally, the teacher's wife, in this 12 years of studentship, the teacher's wife is the matron. She looks after the student's needs. Here, my child, taking the children or the students as her own children. Come on. See the beautiful educational environment that was provided in these days. So the motherly nature of the teacher's wife is saying, please eat something. And the student is so distressed, he says, I can't eat anything. Now, in this condition, and naturally, if you tend the fires, where will your thoughts be? Your thoughts will be on the fires. And so maybe the fires have some answer here. The fires, the story is put that the fires voluntarily say, this one has been feeding us, has been giving us the food, he himself now not in a condition to eat. How can we allow him to starve when he has all along fed us? And so these thoughts will come, and really the meditation on the fire and the importance of the fire, something shifts within us. All our answers shift from within us through meditation or contemplation or concentration. And so these profound answers start. Now, what it means is the real teacher is in nature itself. The real teacher actually is in your own mind. And the physical teacher is there just to stimulate that knowledge that happens from within. Now, if at the end, if the very fundamental nature of your own self is a knower, then it's only to come out. The knowledge or the product of the knower will come out. And so it did in this case. And invariably the stories always end, the teacher comes back and he sees a physical transformation. What was the power of Swami Vivekananda? It was not just in his words, it was in his physical appearance. There's a wonderful, I haven't got it here, there's a wonderful recollection of Swami Vivekananda's physical presence. It had a transforming effect, regardless of the words that came out. His purity and holiness came out, we might say, through the very pores of his skin and from the very actions and the very face and the calmness that was there inherently. And so listeners would have described a number of different combinations that went into the high impact that he had, including the calmness of his face, the tenor of his voice, including his expressions and descriptions, his childlike nature and simplicity. Imagine all of these combined into one. So something is within us that has the capacity to reveal itself to us. And the scripture and the teacher and the place in which we are placed is really a divine structure, as it were, that enables us and facilitates us to grow. And just as the seasons do that for ourselves as well. The transformation, where I come from in Zimbabwe, we have two seasons. We have dry season and wet season. And when I first came to Ireland, I saw the beauty in these defined seasons. So today and a few days previously have been a visible transformation. And this is noticed because, probably more so than maybe last year or the year before, because of the COVID virus, where hopefully we're able to appreciate things in a better way, more of an orientation toward introspection and so on. So there are great advantages to this, and we have to see those advantages. Now, there are great advantages, therefore, in being with a teacher in the forest hermitage and attending after the fires diligently, doing that work. So what the student missed was this: in tending the fires itself, in that whole process, it becomes a purification. And it really was the purified mind that gave him these answers, as seen to be voiced through the flames of the fire. 12 years of purification is what did it. So we assumed that the teacher was a good teacher and said, here is your spiritual practice. And we take the same lesson, by the way, while we're on the subject of Swami Vivekananda, because his devotion to his master and his service, these are the two components that brought him into this phase of absolute outstanding wisdom in small things and big things. Very interesting to read some of his instructions and some of his arguments also. He used to go and beg his food while he was at Balaram Bose's house. He used to go and beg his food. And he was given an attendant. And the devotees also gathered around and said, you don't have to do this because when you go out, people abuse you. And it was true. And they quoted an incident the day before. You went out and you got this abuse because somebody said, what kind of monk are you? You don't go around with your staff. We don't see any mala around your neck. And you seem to be well looked after, robust, even plump. And you're asking us for food and having all that abuse. And his reply was so wise. The person who abused him said to him, he said, you see, the one thing about us from our order is that we never do any harm to anybody and we wish everybody well. And whether you give me food or not, what is that? We rely fully on the divine. And if you don't give it, somebody else will give it. So it is nothing to me and your words are nothing to me. But we only bless you. He could have added, despite your abuse, even that much he didn't say or even think. And he came back and said, you see, this is how sannyasins do it. That is how they procure food. And the person who is trying to persuade him said, but we feel very bad, you see, when you're abused like this and so on and so forth. Finally, the last point of his persuasion was that he found, through the course of the conversation, that was Raj Maharaj, Swami Purnananda, who had said, no, you really have to look after this person. And only then, oh, well, with deference to him, then I'll do it. But otherwise, he produced all the arguments. You couldn't combat any of his arguments. So such an entity learned not through the scriptural texts that were espoused by the teacher, not through that at all. It was purely through service. In this same way, Upakoshala was doing service. And the 12 years acted as purification of his mind. And of course, naturally, toward the end of the 12 years, he's about to go home. And how can he go home without the instruction? Other people, they had the instruction and they were dismissed. Go back. Go back to the next phase of your life. Now, it was a compliment to the student, actually, that he was a special student to keep him in this state. Because he got the highest teachings, and there's no guarantee that all the other students got that higher teaching. They may have gotten all the other teachings, but this higher knowledge, they probably never got. They may have gotten the principles. And we know from the instructions to students in Taittiriya Upanishad, beautiful instructions, instruction after instruction, how to conduct yourself in the world. Having gone through this phase of teaching and training and learning. And it's all about good citizenry, but not necessarily this higher knowledge of Brahman. This was reserved for Upakoshala. So that's my take on it anyhow. All right, good. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.